Okay. All right. What we're going to try to do tonight, I've got a speaker coming in at 5 to talk to us a little bit about communication and collaboration. Okay, good. He is going to share some of his story about being a student with special needs, and he is, I don't know, he's got 7 kids. So he's in an adult education program here on campus. Actually meets on Wednesday nights, and he has this night free, so he's going to come and share a little bit with us. I want to ask him some directed questions and things like that, and kind of go through his thought on how he approached it. And I don't even know it's about his own kids and if they already had IEPs or anything like that. So, what is this? Tonight we're talking about. I love this one right here, by the way. Tonight we're talking about problem solving, interpersonal problem solving, and teams or teaming. I like this right here. It's about problem solving. All right, this is you, Micah. Okay, now listen up. Nobody gets here without answering the following question. Train A leaves Philadelphia at 1 p.m. Traveling, it's hysterical. So I'm thinking I'm never getting into heaven if I had to do that right there. So this is what we're talking about today. Problem solving, and this is a word problem, of course, and that's a math focus, not here. But as we go on down from here today, we're going to hopefully have a guest speaker here in 15 minutes. We're going to talk about problem solving, defining it. We're going to look at the PowerPoint, some videos associated with it. Then we're going to talk about teaming and role playing. Come on in, Sean. We were just talking about you.
Awesome.
You come on. You can come right down to the front if you want. Which is only 4 of us here today. There's usually 6, but there's 2 people had to miss tonight. So
They just had to, right?
that's had to miss tonight. So I didn't even get your name up here on the agenda for tonight.
Oh,
So.
nice.
So we'll do that. We'll do this for we'll be with Sean for about an hour, and then when he leaves, we'll get started on the rest of our stuff. We'll probably close about 7:55 for some people that have to leave. And yeah, so questions on what we're doing tonight? Yeah. Sean, thanks for coming. You can come on up here if you want.
Yeah.
This is Sean Hornbeck. He is working on his bachelor's degree in applied organizational leadership right now.
Yes.
And he currently works for
Erickson.
the phone people, right? Well, communications.
Yeah.
It used to be phone a long time ago. Right?
Yeah. So through the years they've
Yeah,
kind of modified their business strategies.
How many kids you got?
Last I checked, 7.
7 kids. I always wondered what's wrong. Now, what I did was put up here the stuff I was going to talk to you about.
Yes.
So I just kind of put down, yeah. So I'll leave that there. But and if you don't mind, if I go through and ask you questions, or you can even just look at these and ask. But I added a few things to this as we kind of get going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Whatever you want to do.
But basically, I wanted to approach this as having someone that, and I've already shared you've had special needs since you've been here. So he has a learning disability, and I'll let him share himself about that. But he's going to hopefully talk about his experience when he was in school, like in high school, elementary school, middle school, things like that.
Yeah.
Do you have any kids that are special needs, have any IEPs or ADHD or any?
My oldest had the 504.
Okay, good. That makes sense. Okay.
The younger ones we've opted to homeschool.
Okay.
Because of certain things just don't.
Absolutely.
We can talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want you to talk about why you chose to do that.
Okay.
So, but anyway, I'm gonna let you kind of share with us. Do you mind if I interrupt you and talk and ask questions and stuff like that? So, I'm gonna have you basically share what's your experience in special ed. When did you start? Were you ever in special education in school? Did you ever have an IEP or a 504 things like that? So, yeah.
The thought I had with that was it might be more of a psychological perspective.
Sure.
Being younger, we just haven't developed enough to where there's certain things that we run into or experience that we just can't comprehend. A bad analogy would be if we have abuse happening in our family. There's just sometimes we don't know how to process that abuse, and then we carry it on into our adult hood, if you will, and then that same emotion happens when we're an adult, and then we lash out or treat that spouse or that other individual. And I use that analogy because the other day I was explaining to my wife that I had 2 thoughts. I had a thought that, one, when we were younger, we experienced things, good, bad, or ugly, and then as we become adult, those things manifest differently, or we're teenagers and we're moving into our 20s, we make all these decisions that affect our adulthood. So both ways they do, and I've been a product of the special ed, I guess, environment, and I've been very angry for years because of it. And the reason why I share the whole concept of what's happened to me versus the decisions I make, ultimately that doesn't define who I am or control my future. And I just wanted to thank you guys for just pursuing this particular program. Is everybody actually a teacher at this time? So everybody is?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're all teachers. We have 2 practicing special ed teachers right now,
Uh-huh.
a math teacher and a homebound teacher,
Homeschool.
homeschool teacher. She teaches, not her own kid,
Uh-huh.
but she's teaching
So like a co-op?
No, I teach a student who's taught at home due to allergy and disability.
Oh,
He
okay.
goes to a brick and mortar school for specials, but all core subjects I teach at home,
Oh.
at his home.
Awesome.
And they're all working on their master's degree on special education.
Awesome. Man, I'm so thankful. I was so I'm free to just
Oh,
share.
you share what you want.
Okay.
If
So
I see you getting away, I'll kind of bring you
no,
back.
I just we are at a Nazarene school, right? So hopefully there's some biblical aspect to this.
Oh, absolutely.
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 I just felt it would be as long as Wi-Fi works. I wanted to share this because I just was driving over here, just so excited about your hearts, and I was like, man, Father, that's just so amazing that just the draw that you folks have, and if it'll work. But it's 2 Corinthians 5:14 through 16, and it talks about it talks about Jesus, and because he had died for all, it's not, the phrase that it says is,
So all who live,
what's that?
so all who live may.
Not that one. 2 Corinthians. It's coming up.
Dude, you get biblical over here.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That the ministry of reconciliation.
It's for the love of Christ controls us, having concluded this, that one died for all,
There you
therefore all died, and he died for all, so that they who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who died and rose again on their behalf. And I just thought it was so amazing that for the love of Christ controls us. Control is a big, I had an issue, I wrestled with that. But if you think of a magnet and a paper clip, it's just drawn to it. So I've kind of switched the words and said drawn to it. And I see you guys as, you guys are drawn for whatever reason, purpose. Father has given you guys the hearts to draw to that. And there, my opinion is there's got to be some level of love and attraction to that. And at some level, this is a sacrifice. Being here on Tuesday, doing homework, writing just another paper or whatever, there's a level of sacrifice. Just as Jesus, he was drawn to the Father's love, and he seen the bigger picture and knew that, hey, Father has something better in store for everybody else. So I'm willingly going to go take the stripes. I'm willingly going to go do this thing. And I as driving over here, I envisioned you guys in that same light. And from my perspective, I thank you for that. And my hope my hope is to leave you guys with encouragement, and then maybe through asking questions or me sharing, that you guys would walk away seeing yourselves differently, and possibly how you perceive and approach this walk you guys have before you. So thank you. Can I just pray real quick?
Yeah,
Can I
absolutely.
do that for
Go ahead.
myself?
Yeah.
Thank you. Dear Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for you. We're thankful for your Son, and I'm thankful to have this opportunity that while what I perceived as to be bad, and I always had anger and resentment and just negative feelings towards this, Father God, that I get to stand here before your lovely sons and daughters and then share my experience, and not to dwell on it, but to see the hope and the power that you have through this. And I just ask that you be with us tonight, that that you just guide and lead us tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for letting me share that.
Your devotional thought was way better than mine, by the way. Well, I'm like, thank you very much for doing that. I appreciate that.
No worries. That wasn't the first time I shared that. That was
But it
the
does
second time.
tie in with what you were talking about, though.
Okay, so at least there's some
It
fit
does.
there. Yeah, there's some fit. Yeah,
She's
exactly.
getting it.
Yeah, she's the one that's actually teaching the class. I'm just hanging out.
Oh, is that nice. So, I'm 37. Wow. I just turned 39.
You're a couple years,
I don't even know
couple
where
years
that
off
came
there.
from. I
It's
know.
7 kids is the problem.
That's
Yeah.
what it was.
Yeah.
I'm 39. I just turned, on the 29th, I just turned 29. I have 7 kids. I'm married to an awesome woman. I say that because there's definitely challenges with me. But I went to, does it matter what school I went to?
No, you can say whatever.
Okay, so I went to Center High School off at 85th and Holmes, and I graduated high school in 1993. So I believe the Disabilities Act came out in 1990.
Yeah, well, it came out in like 1975, but it was molded and continuing to grow.
Okay.
It was reauthorized in 2004 was the last time.
Okay.
1997, 99, right in there.
So yeah, so from my experience, it seemed like it was that
Yeah.
time frame because that's when
Yeah,
teachers
yeah.
were trying to present stuff to me.
Yeah.
I guess you could say. I was in 2nd grade and was diagnosed with dyslexia, and one of the questions was, did teachers and parents and stuff fill me in? No, nobody filled me in on anything, and I don't know if it was that they didn't fill me in or if that I just wasn't mature enough just to understand everything. I played baseball from the age of 5. I was a pitcher. I played third base. I excelled at sports. And I don't even remember struggling around the 2nd grade time frame. But in 3rd grade, I had this awesome teacher. Her name was Mrs. Clayton. And it doesn't matter, but she was black and just kind of like an Aunt Jemima, just, come here, honey, let me just love on you. And I had hair back then, and so I had 2 cowlicks right here. So my hair would never lay down in the front. And she thought that was just the neatest thing. And I just felt accepted. And so I would say by the time I was in 4th grade, I started noticing things. And I wasn't keeping up with the class. And I did go to my teacher, her name was Mrs. Larkin, and I said, I just don't get it. And I was referring to the subject of math. And from my perspective, she seemed very busy. She seemed like I had the whole class to deal with. And while she didn't tell me she didn't have time, but all the body language expressed that. And but what she did is, I remember it was like a counter. We had like a counter across the thing, and I was looking out the window, and I felt like I was in tears. And she sat down and explained some simple, basic math stuff. And in 4th grade, going into my 5th grade, I just got it. And so from then on, I excelled at math and graduated high school having A's in math. But English just didn't come as easy. I can wear glasses if I want to. I have astigmatism in one eye. But even if I have glasses on, the letters still they just seem to move. I don't even know what that means. They don't stay still. And by the time I always went to a special ed classroom. I was the kid that was in class and I always got pulled out for something. So it was very difficult to share. And people were like, what are you going to this other thing for? In the beginning, it was fun because I got to get away from everybody else. And then you did all these fun projects or put blocks together or whatever else. I seemed to ace all of them, or at least they always gave me an attaboy. And every year in my elementary school, I always had to go to a tutor. I always had to do summer school and I always had to go to a tutor. And I don't remember why. All I remember is if you do A, B, and C, you get ice cream. If you do A, B, and C, you get this reward. And so I seemed to accomplish everything that everybody wanted me to because I always end up with these rewards, but I always found myself stuck back in that same old routine. So it became a way of life for me. I was a shy, quiet kid, and junior high was rough. I just seemed to skate by. Junior high and high school, like I said, this was that would have been the late 80s and then early 90s. I was in classrooms. My classroom was, while you had multiple classes, you went to math, English, or separate subjects. I ended up going to classrooms with children that had Down syndrome and autism, and physically just looked different than I did. And I knew that I functioned better than them. I played sports all through high school, so from that perspective, I did well. I thrived in those things. Again, like I said, I thrived in math, but I was a special ed teacher who I really enjoyed and loved. Her name was Miss Timmons. But through my experiences and the way I shared, I got to a place to where I didn't have to. So the reason why I mentioned the 1990, I'm assuming it came around, my freshman year, because they come out with this thing called accommodations, right? And I just learned that those are just crutches. And if I could manipulate people enough, then I could get away with things. And so for me to even do well in a classroom, I found it very difficult to just the teacher would be teaching and presenting, but I just couldn't quite follow along. I just couldn't quite understand the significance of the material they were presenting. And so I always started out behind. I always started out the same, but I always got behind rather quickly because I learned that in the beginning I was trying to learn that particular teacher or coach or whoever was presenting. If I could ask them enough questions, if I could make a relationship with them, a personal connection, then I could try and understand how they learn maybe, how they articulate their words, and then like a lot of the vocabularies that they choose to use, vocabulary words that they choose to use. And so by the time I was in high school, I did not have to write any papers. I did not have to read any books. So I never wrote a paper, never read a book in high school. And because the accommodation required a teacher had to read it, put it on audio or a cassette, and then whenever it came time to write a paper, I would have to do my best. And then they would turn around, and then I would just dictate it to them, and they would write it up. Or they would just tell the teacher, just don't worry about Sean, just he knows the material because I spoke with him. Even my ACTs, down to that, I still scored an 18 on it, which was back then the bare minimum you needed to get into college, and I had unlimited time. I took over 2 weeks to do that thing, and I was tired of sitting in a room trying to mess with this thing. So many time tests that you have to take through each year, I felt the same way I just got tired of it and just made designs with the dots. I'm saying all these things to say that while the school tried, the approaches just didn't work for me, or it just wasn't the right things to do. So my first year in college, I did meet a friend this person must have been an English major or something, because I had to take a separate class to college, and for whatever reason, the way she explained everything made sense to me. So for once, English started making sense, and I was getting A in my English 101 and 102. The problem was when it came down to write a paper, I didn't know how to take the outline, so I could get an A on the outline. I always could get all my information good, presented well, and then I never could just finish the deal. And so my first year, my freshman year in college was pretty rough because all my accommodations, all the skills that I learned, it's a whole new group of people, and some teachers are just up there lecturing, and you're writing papers and stuff based upon the material you read or something like that. So I decided, I didn't do so well my freshman year, and my parents said that they're not paying for me to just fail out. So I went to Longview, dropped out of university. So my freshman year, I was able to play football, went to Baker University, and ended up with like a 1.4 or something. It was pretty bad. And then I went to Longview, and that was too much like high school. But in order to be in there, they have an ABLE program, and the ABLE program says that because you have learning disabilities, you have to go through all these classes first. So I took a lot of classes that just weren't towards a degree or general classes, but one was learning what the accommodations are, trying to identify who you are and then figure out these things. It was too much like high school, and I just didn't like it, but I did learn some things, and I did learn some things as far as writing papers before. But the key or the takeaway factors was that I was never encouraged to go to college. They always told me that you need to do like a vocational class or VOTEC. Don't worry about these classes because they're not going to be required of you because you're not going to go to that level. And so now, 6 colleges later, I'm finishing out my bachelor's degree, and I'm praying about and considering what masters I should do. Neil has given me some compliments and said that I do write all right. But,
He actually does write very well. And other than actually, I hate writing myself. I'm not a good writer myself. But how could they tell? And how did it make you feel when they told you?
yeah,
"Hey,
I
you're not
don't.
going to go to college.
I don't like labels, and I really despise the word learning disability.
Sure.
Well,
I can understand that.
yeah. So, but I mean, it is what it is.
Sure.
They.
What would you prefer? If you have to explain what, what affected you in school, how would you prefer to describe it or explain it?
No, that's an excellent question. I was thinking about that. Because as I was thinking about that, I was pondering the whole concept of strengths and weaknesses. We tend to, or when I was growing up was, here's all your weaknesses, let's focus on them and have more of an equal perspective. I think I've learned to just to refer to it as a label. Special needs is what some people will say. I don't have a good answer.
Because there is no short answer to explain it, and
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
you want people to get to know you,
yeah,
And we as professionals, we say it because it's easy.
right.
yeah.
You know, and that's what, when I introduced him, that's the very first thing I said.
Mhm.
It's easy for them to understand automatically, but it's complicated.
But I think so. The word, what happens is, if I own that, then I'm just not. I'm only going to aspire. So I'm only going to go so far.
Sure.
And I think there's a lie tied into that, and that's where my biggest struggle is today, is trying to get past that lie. I struggle with a couple of colleges. I think I have like a 3.5 or whatever now, and they took all my credits from Baker, so that was pretty stinky. I was prepared to just retake some classes so that I could have a good one. But hey, I'm not mad at it.
Can I ask you about your folks? What did they do for you? What did they think? Were they communicated with in the school?
I believe that they were. So my mom's frustration was they always wanted to hold me back, and my mom's questions to them is, what are you going to do differently? Him taking second grade again. What are you going to do differently? Him doing third grade again. And they could not adequately answer. They were like, more or less, well, we're going to do the same things. She's like, well, then there's no reason. And so there was this, it was just kind of pushing me through, and that's where I think the accommodations or 504s, they get so just flooded or inundated with just stuff. And maybe my brother. So all of us were in it. My brother was 13 years younger than me. He thought it was just a bunch of junk. And so the whole thing to me was told was that if you get out of LD classes and graduate your senior year not having LD, then your accommodations stop. But if you graduate high school and you were in one of those classes, then for the rest of your life, somebody has to give you an accommodation no matter where you go if you fall into that. My brother said, forget you guys. His sophomore year, he dropped out of it. So my brother's junior year, he went from a C student to an A student.
Mm-hmm.
So he just took ownership and just owned it all. Because I know what to look for. He has some of those tendencies as far as when it comes to reading or whatever else. But for the most part, he's a smart dude. And so I think that's the biggest frustration is that we're trying to do these things to help this particular. So I guess I'm speaking from the perspective of somebody who may have some troubles with reading or math or dyslexia or whatever. Obviously, there's cases that with autism and Down syndrome, things like that. That's a different perspective. But I just got categorized in all that, and so I'm in those classes. And my classes, when I was in there and they're trying to teach them just basic life skills, I'm just using it as a study hall.
I can't believe they put you in a life skills class. And
Yeah.
that would be so unheard of today, wouldn't it? It's just crazy unheard of.
Yeah, it was rough.
Yeah,
It was
sure
rough because you could just imagine the negative words people would say,
Sure.
and then they see you walking out of that classroom and they're like, what are you doing in there?
Yeah.
And you got to share or whatever. So that was pretty rough. But I had some other stuff that I wanted to touch on. guess you can answer.
That's okay. Yeah. Let's see here. Did they explain to you? Let's say when they were working with you on your accommodation,
Mhm.
did they explain to you what they were doing? Did they say to you, you know what, you have a struggle with math or see with reading? This is a strategy we're going to try, and this is why it might work. Or did they just what do they do to build accommodation?
Yeah.
Other than, you know, I mean,
From my perspective,
Uh-huh.
especially in high school, they just ask you, what do you think is going to help you out? What's going to be better? And I had poor studies. So for me, I think it's just study skills. Understanding how to study, like I made a comment to you, my biggest struggle with the capstone is I'm trying to research. I want all this information, and it's too much. It's too much for, it's just too much information. So how do I take that, break it down, put it into bullet points, and a nice fancy outline? Because once I have the bullet points, then I'm able to articulate and just put it nice, neat, and pretty. So that's been my hardest thing. So if I try to step outside of that and push myself, I would get to a frustrated perspective. And then the encouragement was, oh, it's because you have a learning disability. And I honestly, when I was trying to get accommodations, they said, well, what were you diagnosed with? And I didn't know. And so they're like, well, because you've been so long since you've been out of high school, and those transcripts didn't just come right to us, we just need to know what it is. Have you taken a test? Have you physically, they were wanting, and my mom doesn't have them, they were wanting the original diagnosis from when I was in second grade. And so I had to call my mom up and I go, Mom, do you know what I was diagnosed with? And she goes, you don't know? And I was like, no. I always was labeled as LD. I thought that was, it was just whoever was whoever was in that group, everybody had the same symptom. It was an LD symptom. So, yeah, it's pretty ridiculous.
that's amazing.
Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, I guess the early question I had was what made you so angry at the system, and who were you angry at the teachers or the just special ed system or what?
Yeah, I think the system overall. There's a part of ownership that I have to take. That I look back, my brother took ownership and he was able to overcome. And so maybe I'm just more upset with myself that I didn't overcome in those areas, and I allowed fear to dictate my path. And so the areas that I succeeded in, that was fine. I would just go and accomplish or be stretched and so there's times that I'll be sitting down and I have to read. So I was always told that one thing about the ABLE program at Longview, obviously this was back in the 90s, so I'm pretty sure things have changed. They said, so LD umbrella, this is who you are, this is what you should expect. We have accommodations, so you're going to be able to graduate just like everybody else, but you're going to need these things. And so it just was, just drilled into you that if it takes somebody an hour, it's going to take you 3 to 4 hours to read. If it takes somebody an hour to write a paper, that's overwhelming when it's, you're in college and you're trying to do all these things. It's like, man, everybody else gets to go play or do something fun. Man, did I not spend enough years, all my whole summers doing summer school and everything else? And so I think out of that, why did I remember all the gifts, the bikes, the ice creams, and all those events? Why couldn't I remember what was supposed to be taught, the basic, educational, fundamental things? Sure. That would be.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I don't know what Longview is.
Oh, it's a community
Oh,
college.
Oh yeah, Longview Community
Like
College.
in the area here?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
over 470.
It's like Maple Woods, Longview, and
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like
community.
part of the metropolitan system, metropolitan
Okay.
community college system.
Okay.
yeah, so it's like a community college.
Okay.
So like, you're in school.
Mhm.
Your teachers never told you what you had,
Mm-mm.
but you knew you were going to classes. Did you ever see them meet with your parents? And
No,
and
that was always in a separate room. So like if I did go to hearing test, and then
yeah.
because I had to go to psychologists too, they always met separate from me.
So
My
you-
grandparents took me to a lot of the meetings in the
Uh-huh.
beginning, and afterwards, I couldn't even see over the dashboard, and they were in a truck, just an old truck.
Yeah.
So I sat in the middle, and as long as I went and accomplished everything I was supposed to, then we got to go to the arcade. So that's what I remember.
So that was in early late 80s.
That was elementary. So yeah.
Okay.
So I was born in '75. So yeah, early
Okay.
80s, through my 80s and then 90s.
Yeah, so that would make sense there. It's just coming into its own, the IDEA, for a better
Right.
term, was coming in 1975, and they're still trying to figure it out by then. And so when you get to high school in the 90s, you know, they're
Yeah,
still
that was-
not, they're still not communicating anything with you or your parents at that
Mhm.
time.
No.
And did they ever invite you to an IEP meeting? And I guess the other
I
question
think by
is-
then, I think by junior high,
Yeah.
it was they just ran with what was the last
Oh, I see.
thing. I think sixth grade, sixth or seventh grade. I don't ever. You know, you would have your parent-teacher
Yeah.
conferences or whatever, and that was always with the special ed teacher.
And you said you were on the 504 plan, correct?
I don't think I was on the phone. My
Oh.
my oldest son.
Oh, your
we
son.
tried
Okay,
that.
okay, I see what you're saying. And technically, you should have been on an IEP.
I
right?
think that's what. Yeah,
and
but
your
I've never
parents
seen
should
it.
have signed that. sometime or
Yeah,
another.
that's what. Yeah. So when they asked me what was I diagnosed with, whatever, that they were wanting that paperwork and stuff. So since then, my parents have been divorced.
And,
So
and,
the
and
paperwork's
if
fine.
it makes you feel any better, the law has changed in 2004 when it was reauthorized. The law says that they have to invite you to an IEP meeting,
Yeah.
and they have to invite your parents, and they have to invite separately when you're in high school.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they would have included you.
Yeah, And I was wondering that, and I'm glad you said it because I just took my daughter to orientation for college, and even though my child is 17, she's going to be 18 before she takes her first class because that FARPA or whatever it's called, they won't talk to me about anything.
That's right.
I'm like, and they go, parents, we get it, we know you're paying the bill, and so I was like, you know what, I bet if that's changed, because when I went to college, none of this, my parents set up everything, and then I just showed up the first day. And then they're wanting to talk to me about bill and all this other stuff, and I was like, you need to talk to my parents. I don't have a clue what you're talking about. So, but
Yeah, it's different. It's a different.
So I think that like in my freshman year in college, if I wouldn't have ruined that relationship, it would have been a different outcome.
Sure.
And then you have so many kids. How does that teacher, find that one child and then try and work on their strengths or really connect? So my thought was, what caused me to get so behind? If I'm at the same level as everybody else, and if I can figure things out and get to that place, what is it that causes me to get so far behind? And I think for me trying to understand and learn the teacher, and just really, in 1998 I was working in Omaha, and this history teacher. What he did is he was a history teacher, and he also taught English as a second language. So I'm going to say he taught some Hispanic people, and I have no idea why I'm just not sharing.
That's okay. I do the same thing.
So everybody would go to lunch on the breaks, and it was a week-long class for project management. And he brought his lunch. I brought my lunch, and so we got to talking. And I said, and he wanted me to critique him. And I told him he was doing well, and he presented this way, and blah, blah, blah. And he was blown away at my perception and how I presented him. Because that's not what he was asking me. He wanted to know, like, what everybody else would answer. And I said, well, when I was in high school, I had to learn people, not the class or the material. And so I think that's what took me so long and I tended to be the quiet, shy person is because I was so busy trying to focus and concentrate on what is this approach? What is this strategy? And then, like I said, I did well in math and had A's, but there was one time in math that I didn't, and it was a completely different teacher, and it just was crazy. They just wanted to say their piece and move on to the next thing, and I had tons of questions. I remember one time I asked so many questions in math, and here's what's crazy. For a student that has a learning disability, tends to be slower on tests. They read slower, the comprehension is slower. My question is that true? Or my question is there something up front at the beginning that we can do better? Because I asked so many questions and did all these things that people would point at me, make fun of me. And I mean, these are guys that I even play football with, so it's like they know my abilities on the field, so just get off my back. When the test would come, I could finish it with your long formulas, FOIL and everything else. It didn't matter. I could finish my test within 15 minutes. And these people are like, I bet you failed it, blah, blah, blah. So I ended up with an A in the class. By the end of that semester, I was actually able to student teach the other people. So who would have thought that a special needs or an LD student would be able to rise up to that perspective? So it was certain teachers in my life who just seen something different in me, And that would be the biggest takeaway is can you see that in them? Or see why they're struggling if it's somebody such as me that they're still trying to figure you out? Because that's the biggest thing is, how do I learn? And I was so busy trying to struggle with that what made me successful in football was that if I wanted to be the star running back, then I watched this guy, how he moved, how he juked people, when he caught a ball, did he always bring it in? Did he hold it out? Did he hot dog with one hand? I'm telling you, I broke it down. I analyzed everything to even his workouts. This guy would put plate, like why most people would do squats or lunges backwards, this guy would put a plate there. So he would do his squats, and then he had the plates to actually do calf raises at the same time. Plus, he's working on his balance at the same time. Then what I would do is I would do everything he did, including his sprints. If his time was, a 4.7, I gotta make that. Then when I'm at his level, then there's freedom in that. There's freedom in that level because now I get to be me. Now, what does Sean offer? What can I offer to the thing? And at that level, so especially at the high school level, I won lots of awards and patches because the fact is everybody's seen it as Sean gives 110%. No, I'm trying to just get to what I thought was an even playing field. And from their perspective, no, dude, you're going way above and beyond. And so from my perspective, I have to work so much harder than everybody else just to get to a place of a regular playing field. So I take that to the classroom, and well, the teacher must know everything, and they're the one that's going to grade me. So if I can understand them inside and out and figure out how they're grading and what this means and everything else, so maybe I just had so many questions and they're trying to get those answered that I just would get behind. Now, don't take that away from me, daydreaming here and there and being a typical boy.
Of course.
But yeah.
Well, it's interesting that, how often have you guys sat down with somebody with
No, you can say
a learning disability?
yes. You're good.
All right. Have you sat down, and have you talked to an adult? You guys ever talked to an adult with a learning disability and saw their perspective on this side of it, Because I bet it's like, you remember it was like yesterday,
Yeah.
elementary school,
Yes.
Do you ever feel like you're back in that time when you're on your job and you're training for something or you're trying to do something? Does it ever take you back, and how does that hinder you with your employer?
I'm glad you mentioned that because the first thought came to me is a fight that I got with a kid because he just kept saying I'm an idiot.
Uh-huh.
And I'll be transparent. My wife and I will get into arguments, and I'll have that same emotion because I can't articulate or I can't get her to just see where I'm coming from. And then I get really frustrated. She always tells me I say that word wrong, so I apologize. Maybe there's some phonics or something I'm missing.
Nothing wrong with that.
But we've been married for 10 years, so where am I failing myself to be at this evil, wow, that wasn't a slip. This even playing field to where we can just easily, I get it's probably husband and wives and, man versus woman, whatever, but that same emotion, because my wife has asked me many times, she goes, I know that all too well. Are you doing okay? Yeah? Why? Why are you asking? So why are you angry? I'm not, and there's just that sense of like being in the classroom again and you must be an idiot. You're just not as good as everybody. You can't explain yourself. And so I'm definitely in life striving for something or to prove everybody wrong or prove that, And when I was driving here, I was like, you know what? So maybe this will lead me to the next thing is that clock right? Because it doesn't seem like it's moving. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So, okay. So it's 20 at 5 after?
A little bit fast.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, it is a
It's
bit. It's about 5
5:36.
minutes fast.
No worries. Okay.
Yeah, it's only.
So I'm
5
doing
minutes.
good. This is-
Yeah, you're
this is
good.
awesome.
You're good.
This is awesome. I'm so glad we have all this time. Because it was going to play into the next statement.
Like how close are we together? Every time I teach, I do the same thing. When I'm teaching you guys, I do the same exact thing.
I already thought he had it. Just kidding.
I would have the same problem. Were you talking about your wife and your relationships?
You
And
said you were driving over here. and
Yeah, you were
thinking
thinking
about
about
it.
I know what I wanted to go into, but I thought it would be a great tie-in, but maybe I'll think of it. So, that was kind of the because in the beginning you said, hey, good, bad, and then
Yeah,
ugly,
absolutely.
and then things
Absolutely.
some things to walk away with. Let me ask, is there any questions you want to ask about as far as my struggles or things that I may have experienced or anything like that before we go into some positive things, or maybe this was it. In those moments, I'm so busy dwelling on the past or those negative perspectives instead of seeing how far I've come and where I'm at, and then trying to have that conversation with my wife or that situation out of that perspective instead of, oh, here I am again. So, but
Do you think it'd be a good idea? This is something I've kind of thought a lot about. To raise awareness with other students. Like, hey, I struggle with this, but it's not that big of a deal. It's not something that I'm going to use it. Like, obviously, you don't. I mean, I don't want this to be an excuse. Would that be something positive, or should there be
so yeah.
more confidentiality there?
Yeah, because that's difficult in the high school perspective or school, because for whatever reason, my daughter has graduated with honors. She's got academic scholarship. She's just killing it. Honestly, I let her proofread all my papers, and she just goes, Dad, there's nothing wrong. My 13-year-old, so she's 17, she's getting ready to go to college. She wants to do creative writing and or literature. And then my 13-year-old son is doing the same thing. Every single test the public school system can give you, right? Public schools. So they're like in 7th grade, he's reading at like, college freshman year level, or the paper he writes or whatever. So he's extremely bored. He's tested 3 times for a LEAP program, which is on Missouri side, or just to skip a grade. He missed it by 1 point. So you're smart enough, son. You're just not. You're smart, but you're just not smart enough. So you're going to stay where you're at. For whatever reason, he got stuck in a generic average math class, and he's just too bored, and now he's getting in trouble. And so I've spoken with the teacher, and I've explained, here's his past. Now he's so outgoing that one year a teacher taught him how to celebrate quietly, because kids were getting offended by him because he was like, yes, I got another one right, when some kids are struggling. What was the question? I don't get it. So, he would do things like, wow, or whatever, right? And so this teacher, she figured out him. Now he's on the complete opposite scale of me, but in 7th grade, this math teacher I think she's just ticked. I think she just had enough of him. She wants bad things for him. And I shared with her where he's at. And I told her where I have been, and I said, he's very good at communicating, and he's a people person. He's very social. Take this kid and all of his abilities and have him help these other kids. Because he had I've been married and divorced, so his mother has a 4-year-old that has Down syndrome, and it's, what a tangled web we weave. I said it very slow because I get tongue-tied on that.
Sure.
But we get along, me and my ex, so well that my wife, who homeschools, watches her child on a regular basis. So this child has Down syndrome, and so he knows from that perspective of picking on kids and things like that. And so I said, what you need to do is call this kid up and out. And I think that long-winded story to say, I would encourage you to look at those kids that are just killing it. Like my daughter, she was a quiet person in there and just did her business, but deep down inside, she's coming out of her shell finally. She has this heart to serve people. She opened up and said she'd like to go on a missions trip, and she thinks that she might want to be a teacher. And so, man, what a great opportunity. If this child is doing AP Math, do you guys do AP on the Kansas side?
Yeah.
And so she's taking all kinds of college classes in high school. Like one college accepted her as a junior, so she would have graduated high school and had an associate's at the same time, at the age of 17. Oh man, I was all for that. But she's like, maturity-wise, she's like, that scares me. So that how is an LD child giving birth? Okay, I didn't birth anybody. I apologize. Maybe it was my ex. Darn it, she was good. I'm just kidding. That was all jokes.
He talks to himself too.
In third person. I do. Oh man, I apologize. I really went on that. So, anyways, to me, that's a great resource to take those children and then cycle them back through, if you will. That develops mentorship, leadership, and I understand that the school has that. But what if is it wrong? Because I know that in order to graduate and get an A+ program and then get certain grades, so if you do these things, you're doing it for this. Why not just do it because you have this desire or a teacher? I think the times that I thrived in school was when a teacher seen something in me and called it out of me, and then I was successful in it at their guidance. So if this teacher or another teacher could take my son and not struggle with him, but put him in a position to teach these kids, and then even partner, maybe what I need to do is just tell the teachers, hey, I'm willing, this is my suggestion and recommendation, let me know your thoughts on it. Because if he does get out of hand, then let me remind him who his father is. Let me remind him who all his siblings are, because kids are kids, and they do. And my son, he's a pretty boy and very popular, and tends to take the kid. He's been a quarterback since he was in 3rd grade. So at 7th grade, he just has all the friends and everything else, and he's never had a struggle with that. And so I keep reminding him, while you haven't struggled with it, you need to look back and see who does. And so he gets himself in trouble by just being the social one. But and that was a long-winded answer. But now to the other side of it, you definitely have to pick mature students to be able to help that. But especially if you're not able to, let's say there's 30 kids, and you can't just reach that one child, or take the student that is excelling, have them help just some of the, maybe, this sounds so bad, the lower performing students that haven't been diagnosed or have these issues, maybe out of that. So I help, so I run, on top of having a job and going to school, I also lead the kids ministry in Ottawa. And the biggest thing that helps me out in that ministry is, it's not when I'm articulating something, but it's when another child gets what I'm saying and then articulates it to the other one. For whatever reason, that starts a chain reaction, and then everybody's getting it. So out of that perspective, whatever that looks like in your classroom or whatever, that would be a huge suggestion. And then I don't know that you would ever get away with kids getting picked on or that kid just feeling left out, but it's just finding that thing inside of them and then calling them about it. Math. I'm not as good as I thought I was in math. I am better at English. Reading books just takes forever for me still. But writing a paper seems so easy than figuring out a math problem. Maybe not for you. But it is. It's less, even though I could finish one in 15 minutes, it's just that I had to be just so focused and just knock it out. On the paper, I can tend to drift. You can be creative. That daydream, you can throw a little bit of that in there. I think there's more freedom in that. Math seems to be more structured, and I love that. And so being in college, being, I'm going to say Mid-America, not to put any more plugs in there that you need a doctorate, but that this program that I'm in, the structure fits me perfect, and I'm able to just be free. I feel like I'm at a good playing level and to be free. The other thing was, my wife spoke about, was the mentality. Maybe it's a psychological perspective. What was it? There's one that's called counseling and I didn't print it out. It doesn't matter, but it said like psychology and counseling, and that still doesn't do it. I'm gonna look up the word and I'm gonna send it to you. And the definition of it, talking about careers, like if you wanted to be, a pastor or you wanted to be a math teacher, and one of the classes said, pull up like a job description or whatever, and one of them, and as I was reading it the other day, it said identifying learning styles and abilities, and then taking that and writing curriculums and stuff out of there. So I still want to go research that. What does that look like? Because I think that feeds into the concept of, if I could sit down with that student and really get to know them and understand, maybe out of that I can, encourage. One of the students or one of the kids in the kids ministry, he's just a mess. He always causes problems. And he kicked one kid and chipped a permanent tooth, And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so horrible. And so one time I had one of the other leaders take him out and talk to his mom. His mom spoke with me, and she said, yeah, we know about this. And I'm sitting there trying to say, man, I'm not doing a very good job. If I came from this environment, I'm not doing a very good job helping this kid out. And so one day I finally just pulled him aside and started talking to him. And he goes, yeah, you know what? He goes, I'm lucky to be here. I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, I had an accident and I hit my head really hard. And so if I hit my head in that same spot again, I could die. So the kid had a head injury at a very young age, and so now he's in this position. And I'm telling you what, his brother asked this question. So, if said something like, "So if God is so big and so powerful, why is He invisible?" And this kid is younger, and he says, "Well, I think this is what you fail to realize, is that it's by faith, not by sight." And I was like, "What the heck?" I'm always thinking this kid doesn't listen. But by me taking the time to just listen to him and let him share with me, and we just, had a conversation, there was a different level, and he felt like he belonged, and he felt engaged in the next words out of his mouth. And so, when before I always dismissed it, now it's like, okay, he's still reckless, especially when you do worship. The kid is just trying to do mosh pit every time instead of, focusing. But so we ran into problems with, talking about the 504. Like one teacher, my son loved her to death, but she literally put masking tape around his chair, and he could get up, do cartwheels, jumping jacks, whatever he wanted, but he had to make sure the cartwheel landed and started and finished in that box. There's no way he could do that, so unfortunately, But that was like one of the only classes that he thrived in.
Well, I'm glad you brought this up. This is a good segue. Isn't it? On the flip side now, you got a kid in special education. This class is communication, collaboration, special ed. When you go in and talk to the teacher, you're a dad, and you've had your struggles, but now you want to help your kid.
Yeah.
One thing we've been doing is communicating. A little thing on the floor. Remember that mat? Did you guys do the mat for interpersonal communication yet? Have you had that class yet? I think you'll do that class. Anyway, you'll do the mat. Anyway,
Okay.
How do you approach your teachers? How do they approach you? Do you feel like they're an adversary, or do you feel like they're on want to advocate for you and your family?
So my oldest son has graduated. I started very young. Yes. In the beginning, it was all my own griefs and issues. So when I spoke with them, I wanted them to understand my pain and then do a better job with my son. The later years is I'm trying to build more of a relationship with the teacher and say, these are some things that worked in the past. These are some things, because it tended to be, once the 504 was created, you can add to it or whatever, but really there wasn't follow-up or follow-through or let's revisit this. If it's supposed to go through the counseling system at the school, they're too busy to really do anything at the school my kids go to. So just my normal kids just trying to get information based on school or college or whatever just didn't happen. So there might be a gap there that needs to be addressed. But the key for me was making that connection and being mindful to build a relationship and just explain who my child is and what might benefit and what might work. For my son, they wanted to put him on medicine in the beginning, and that was he wasn't the same person. And he's very smart, very intelligent, spells well, reads well. It was just him sitting his butt down and giving the teacher the respect. So just trying to figure out ways to keep him in his seat and not disrupt everybody else.
Because we also know if we communicate with teachers, we bring this baggage in with us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and sometimes they may say something that sets you off. Have you ever been in a situation where that they say something not meaning it, but you're like, hey, that's not right, or you take it different. I don't know if you've been in a situation like that or not. Or have you said something to the teacher and then they get upset about?
No, I think in that forum, I think that I tend to be the quiet, shy person, and I'm trying to read. I'm analyzing so much.
Sure.
I speak really slow, and I try to make sure I say what needs to be said from a beneficial perspective. Now with my wife, there's times that I'll bring that up because I ask myself all the time, why is it something that she says always has to be triggered? And it does. It always has to be back to some learning concept or something.
You guys have any questions for him?
Because there's two things that I definitely want to talk about.
Please do.
So, I should ask you, in my journey to try and fix this, to try and rise above, to put myself at a playing field, I'm not even saying that phrase right. It's
A level playing field?
Yeah, level playing field. What was I saying before?
I
think I said even. There,
Sure.
so it didn't sound right in my ear. Have you guys ever heard of Orton Gillingham? It was 2 doctors back in the, let's say, late 60s, early 70s. So the public school system had, they noticed this gap. They noticed this issue back then, and they couldn't figure it out because the public school system says, this is the structure, everybody in and out, but everybody's not the same, and everybody, in my opinion, is designed differently. And so they were running into some problems and some struggles. So 2 doctors, Orton and Gillingham, along with some other, were all tasked with coming up with a learning style, if I'm saying this right, not necessarily the curriculum for it, but definitely a learning style. And the public school system did not go with theirs. They did go with what is currently in the public school system now. Hopefully it hasn't changed too much, so that's why I'm not going to share too much information other than the names if you want to go research it. A lady by the name of Susan Barton. You can Google Susan Barton, and she has a program out there that is based on Orton Gillingham's research. And what she says is that you can have, anybody can be the tutor. All you have to do is be able to hear the sounds. So everybody in my family can hear the sounds except for me. I just could not pass that little simple test. So what she says is the first three courses, you will develop that. By the 4th one, as you pass those, then you can teach yourself. So me being an adult, then I could kind of walk myself through the rest of them. There's 10 of them, and here's how the story goes. She had a nephew who had been diagnosed with dyslexia and having a learning disability. These people, she's older than me, and so is he. These people, being psychologists, teachers, counselors, they even would come to the home. And this child was so advanced when he was younger, before he hit school age, that he never even crawled. He just immediately started walking. And so they thought maybe that was it. They would come over for an hour to 2 hours, and they would force this 13-year-old boy to start crawling because he missed some developmental things. And just over and over again, just these obnoxious things. And out of that, the aunt is Susan. It upset her. So she's like, oh, this is for my nephew, and I'm going to solve this problem. And so she's been to school, has a bachelor's degree, and decides that she's going to go get a master's or doctorate in education. But the program doesn't start. So she decides to get a job at a learning center, like an adult educated learning center. And so she goes there, talks to them about it and everything else, and the people just love her heart and her desire and everything else. And they go, well, we have one question for you. Why are you going to go get a doctorate? She goes, because at that level, they're going to teach me everything I need to know to do this. She goes, no, I have 4 ladies on staff that already have this. My suggestion to you, if you want to do that, that's fine. My suggestion to you is to look outside of that. And so that's when she started doing the research and found the Orton Gillingham. She has her own website, her own business, everything else. I've spoken to them more than once. They're a Christian-based group, to where this one lady believed that God was going before me. 2008, 2009, I was encouraged through the church. I started serving in 2007. I started going in 2004 when I met my wife. And she said her husband's going to be a man after God's own heart. And since I already had a family, 3 older kids, that her family was going to go to church. So if she dates me, that's a family, or going to be one, so we got to start going to church. So I coached, I played football, did all these things. So I earned my way into teaching because I'm goofy and I dance. So if I can sit there and mock a running back, or is mock or mimic, mimic or whatever the word is, then all I did was I also went to grow up off of 8th and Prospect. So if you watch enough people, even in their communication, even in their body language, their dance moves have character. So kids camp, I know I really changed the story. In kids camp, I started dancing around, hooting and hollering, and they said, can you do this every weekend? I said, yes, I can. If all teaching is just dancing, I'm going to do this. And I was encouraged by my pastoral staff, man, why don't you go to school? And because from that, then, they would, there might be a pastoral position or teaching or something. My church wanted to have accredited college. So you could go there. It hasn't happened yet. It takes years to be accredited, right? But out of that, the teacher, who was a pastor, also a teacher, I failed all my studies. We were doing Old Testament survey, and I couldn't get it. I couldn't memorize everything. This is just too heavy. Plus, it was stuff I'd never even done, and now I got to read. But out of that, he just asked a simple question: do you believe that God has asked you to be at this level? And I said, yes. He goes, then let's believe together and pray about it. And so every time I sit down to pray, whenever I'm struggling with paper, struggling with something, if I just stop to pray, one, it helps me take my mind off of the negative stuff and put it on the positive. That out of that, I'm able to be successful. So I've taken this approach and just shared my testimony, everything to the Susan Barton's group, and the lady gave me the first 2 sessions for free. Each of them were like $500 to $1,000 pop. I shared my story at church, and the lady said that her daughter has dyslexia, and whenever I'm ready, she wants me to tutor her. I'm like, who am I to tutor? But I'm getting it now. I went ahead and felt that because I'm in school and I'm growing in this perspective, each time I write a paper, I'm better than I was yesterday. So I didn't necessarily need that program, but I felt like I needed to give it to them. But it's the program, it has success, and it's very successful. So in that, there's some of the stories and ideas and their approaches. I think especially from an in English or learning, writing and spelling and reading perspective, there's so many testimonies as far as how adults who just felt ignorant and just couldn't read, illiterate, that was the word I was looking for, who are being very successful. There's a pastor called Greg Rochelle, and he was diagnosed with dyslexia, and his mom did all his work for him. And he's a successful pastor, and this company publishing company, they wanted him to write a book. They wanted him to just tell his story or whatever. So what they did is they asked him, and he's like, dude, I don't write. If I do anything, my mom proofreads everything. She's like the secretary for the church or whatever else. And so what they did is they gave him an editor. They said, this is our best editor, everything else. You just have to dictate everything to him or whatever else. So the editor said, here's what we need to do. We need to have a starting point. All I want you to do is just take 2 hours, sit down beside yourself, and just start writing. And he goes, I'm really good at this. I can read any handwriting. I'm good at this. So trust in me, and you just write. What Greg Rochelle wrote in those 2 hours was months worth of work. So out of that, this guy's wrote tons of books, and he's just educated. He's just very intelligent and everything else. And so out of that, also Maxwell, there's a writer named Maxwell. He wrote David and Goliath and writes about dyslexia and learning disabilities in his book, and says that these students are actually can become more successful because they've had to overcome all these different, like for instance, me having to understand and learn you as a teacher or you as a teacher. I created different learning skills that most people might not use or whatever. And then the last one is a lady named Dr. Leaf. She was born and raised in South Africa, had her doctorate there. She studied in the brain, so I can't even think of it now, but brain, the neurons. Yeah, where where thinking happens in the, something like that. So she started off dealing with head injuries, and from that perspective, trying to help somebody who had a head injury, learn life skills and connect these things. And so she's a strong Christian and uses like Proverbs. I can't remember the exact one, but it says her house was built on 7 pillars, and in that perspective, her is talking about wisdom. And these 7 pillars, she's able to take the brain, break it up into 7 different perspectives. And what she says is that every person, so she believes 100% in the Bible, and that everybody was created differently. I'm going to be the best Sean that there is. Neil cannot be Sean. You just can't. As much as you want to be or try, your best bet is to be the best Neil. What people were doing is, actually people were doing where they were trying to take Einstein, they had the whole bell curve, trying to take all these people who win, Nobel Peace Prizes and everything else and say, if we can figure out these people, then structure our learning towards that, we're going to have a better society or our school's going to be better or whatever. And out of that, she challenges everybody to say the bell curve is messed up. It's actually hindering us. And somebody actually stole Einstein's brain and said that, and they looked at it and it was oblong. So if you look at the brain and you have the stem here for your vertebrae, it kind of has, everybody shows this nice little oval thing, right? Right here in the middle was where Einstein, right smack dab in the middle, Einstein, that was his biggest strength. Or you could say it how she says it is, that was your first window, that was your first door into learning and receiving things. That was the biggest part of his brain because he functioned out of that and he learned through that doorway, through that sphere of perspective. And so they're like, oh, if we could study other people's brains, and if you have this, you're going to be smart. What happens is if you are kinesthetic, think of a child who has the first two, now you have 7 and you're going to function through all those, and there's a couple other things to it. But let's say your first 2 are kinesthetic and visual, right? Kinesthetic being moving your hands and things like that, right? So this child, you have him sit down and you tell him not to move. Guess what you've done? You've taken away that first door. But he's that child that wants to get up and move around like my son with the box, because maybe that's how he has to think. But say you just tell him to sit down, here's a pen, don't move. Just listen to the teacher. So you took away the first one, and then he starts drawing and doodling because he's visual, or he steers out the window, and the teacher smacks the rule on the table. Maybe that was back then.
It's pretty fun.
Across his knuckles. Then you took away the first 2, and now you're trying to figure out why this child can't grow with the class, why they can't learn, because you took the first 2 away. She spent 25 years, and I believe 100% without a shadow of a doubt, I know this isn't a biblical class, but I believe in my struggles, because I was talking to Neil saying, Neil, I found all this information, and he's like, Sean, it's way too much. You're not writing a novel, you're just writing small paper. Even though it's supposed to be 30 to 70 pages, it's still a small paper compared to all the information I'm gathering. I'm overwhelmed, and I still haven't gotten it all together. But in that moment of just going, oh my gosh, God, because what did I say? I said that I pray when I get overwhelmed, whatever. And he said, hey, why don't you just take a step back? Other people have gone before you and done things. Matter of fact, I've asked them to do things. Look at this doctor. She spent 25 years studying this. Don't go reinvent the wheel. Go and look at her research and see how that can apply to your counseling center or to your kids ministry or to the public school system. I did want to, I wanted to get her early and queue it up or whatever, but it didn't happen. But I can send you the link. It's 45 minutes, but there was this one clip in there. How she went from helping children with head injuries to where she has this quiz you can take personality-wise, and it helps her identify where you're at on the scale of learning. And she's literally saved teenagers who wanted to commit suicide, who wanted to do these things, while they've been going to counseling and going to all these places. That wasn't their struggle. Everything's being addressed from a symptom perspective, and nobody's addressing the root. And a matter of fact, speaking of root, if you chop the brain in half, or if you looked at the brain as they connect to those neurons and make more and more, it looks like a tree that's flourished. But a child that, when you hinder them in those areas, it stops producing, and it becomes like a dead tree, or it is very small. So she could easily identify, do a CAT scan or whatever else, and she could see that. But what she would do is she would create this thing, and then that would help her draw out their learning style, and she would automatically, like a teacher. This one student was a kinesthetic and excellent, just a beautiful musician on the piano. Well, the 15-year-old started struggling and having problems in school. Parents took away that. They took away his biggest asset. So the kid struggled. By the age of 15, he'd been writing notes and journaling about killing himself and everything else. Once she did this assessment, she realized that he did well in math and had this. So all the things lined up to do this, and so she started asking him about his likes, dislikes, things like this. And she asked him about piano came up or whatever else. She literally had to beg the parents. They're like, no, we will not get, this is his discipline for doing horrible in school. Once they gave it back to him, I don't know his name or whatever, but he writes beautiful music and everything else, and his grades went from failing to being A's. Just because she helped open up that first door.
What's the lady in the research called?
Dr. Leaf. I'm going to tell you what, I almost brought him in here. On faith, because when God told me, hey, don't do that, $209, you can buy her whole brainy pack. and it has how to address it from a ministry perspective, how to address it from a school perspective. She has gone into schools and helped them restructure the whole thing. There's just something about her. So I'm sitting here from my perspective, and I don't know if I presented this to Neil, but my biggest reason why I wanted to do the counseling center is because I wanted to be a life coach. I wanted to do away with labels, to debunk all these statements, stigmatism and labels and stereotypes, and say, no, let's figure out who you are in Christ. That's why I wanted to do the faith thing. But more and more, as this journey God Father has me on, is that this is for everybody. And it doesn't matter if you believe in Christ or not. You can be successful in life. There's just some things. And it was amazing because I enjoy reading the Bible, and I love that she was able to tie all her principles back to that. And then on top of that, she's worked alongside with, she's trained teachers. She's even shared on her video and things like this, where teachers would be like, I don't agree with you. And then she would one-on-one sit with them and talk about it. So she's, like I said, so in there, that was her story. And she said, and she uses the word label and how we've gotten away from it. Now, that's not to take away, there might be some kids that fall into this, may need some medicine or whatever else. But her success, and that's when I wrote the letter. That was the people I wrote the letter to. Because my biggest thing was, I'm doing this paper out of this heart and out of this mindset. I wanted them, like, she gives statistics in her research, and I was asking, hey, her years of counseling and teaching these other people, whatever, can I get some of that material? And they're like, all her material is pretty much published right here, so you bought the Brainy Pack, so you can have everything. You just need to study it some more. So that's why I'm at.
Well, and the thing he's talking about, his project or his counseling center, in his program for the organizational leadership, they have an applied project. It's a thesis, pretty much. I don't know if you guys ever written theses before or a mini thesis. His ends up being a 5-chapter thesis, pretty much. So,
And I'm trying to solve world hunger with it.
yeah, pretty much. He's trying to get.
I want to address this.
Yeah,
I want to
yeah,
address eating disorders. I want to address. So check this out. This is so awesome. So I go to a week-long counseling seminar, right? And in there, it's faith-based, and they're saying their biblical counseling is where it's at. So I'm trying to sit there and take. I've been to counselors. I've been to this, and I just didn't. I didn't have success. I didn't find the freedom. I didn't get to this level playing field. So we're there. And some counselors, they all want to be put out of a job. So if you put yourself out of a job, which you never will because people just have issues, that 6 weeks, this one guy who's actually a doctor and everything else goes, I don't know what it is, but they always send me the most difficult ones because it takes me 13 weeks. So this thing about 6 weeks, forget those guys, it's 13. And so that humor and just his transparency just caught my attention, and I really paid attention to him. And he said, the community loves these people so much that they're building buildings on their sites. And they say the community, like big companies, give them money for families who have been in a tragedy like a storm or an environmental issue, and then they have this site where it's women. All women age, doesn't matter. And the biggest thing that he's seeing more and more was the cutting. And he's like, I just don't get it. I don't understand why cutters cut themselves, and he hasn't been able to find it biblically. I went to an equipping conference, came back, and my brother, who has threatened my life because he got into some crazy stuff, said I was some bad person and the only way to take care of people like me was to cut their heads off, and he said he was going to bring a sword over and do this. My brother has cut his wrist before and tried to take his own life. And so here we are. I'm on the phone talking to him, and he's so blind and oblivious to the information I'm presenting right before him. How many times did that happen to me in school, or my learning style or whatever else hindered me in that? But I shared story after story for a whole week, and then I shared this story where Jesus and the disciples come up on this man who was possessed by legions, and he had tormented and haunted and just destroyed this town, just ran this whole town to where he was literally butt naked, outcast, hung out in the cemetery. They chained him up. They'd done all these things. So sometimes when a person is oppressed this much or bothered this much, they have this extreme extraordinary power to where they just couldn't subdue this guy. Somehow they convinced him to hang out there. What happens is somebody who was just mentally and just so stressed out and just in that place, this guy literally was taking a rock, smashing it into his chest. Think about this. Your pain on the inside is so great that you can cut yourself literally. And what would happen is he would cut himself so deep to where that pain would equal out. And then when the pain on the outside was greater than the inside, he'd have to stop and drop the rock. That's when Jesus comes up upon him and says, and my brother goes, stop. That's me. I realize I just shared the story of what cutters deal with. And so I say that because I'm encouraged by, I don't think it's by accident I stumbled across any of these stories or these people. There's answers out there, and it doesn't have to be the same for everybody. As a matter of fact, I'm going to tell you, it's different for every person. Jesus didn't heal every blind person the same way because of maybe he was born because there's a genitor. How do you say that word? Genitor. It has to do with you're born this way.
Genetic.
Yes. Where some kids back in the Old Testament were born without eyes, so they were blind from that. Or somebody had an injury. So Jesus had to reach people at just right where they were at. So don't take my story and say everybody's just like that. I know you guys are not going to do that. But it's not just Dr. Leaf. It's not just Susan Barton. But there's just something that's going to work and connect just for each one of those people. And the biggest thing I think is you guys have that heart. Just listen to those students and then just be led in that right direction as far as what they might need. But it's I mean, you guys are sacrificing a lot. That just me thinking back to all the teachers that I had, even the ones that I loved and I thrived under. Being a teacher was a chore in itself, but the ones that had the most impact on me, you could tell they loved their job and they did it for those reasons, not for anything else.
Let's give Sean a big hand. Thank you, Sean, very much. I tell you, timely information you shared with us, especially for these teachers. We need to hear from adults like yourself that have been through the system and then have kids maybe in the system so we can approach our families better and better meet their needs and serve them in the community. But thank you once again. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and then, so I know things can be costly or whatever, but like I said,
Sure.
I bought the whole Brainy pack, so if there's the DVDs pack or whatever else, I would be willing to.
Okay.
I've just started. I mean, I got so much on my plate right now, but
We'll
yeah.
help you through it.
So anything that I have that might interest you in that area or whatever, let me know. So I told the other couple that had the first two things, I never even opened it up or nothing. I just really felt like it was for me from the Susan, the Horton Gillingham